My mother-in-law and brother grabbed hubby's estate to render me homeless. I passed them the keys and $500,000 in ticking debt. I walked off with $1.2 million cash. My name is Clara, and until about 6 months ago, I lived in Allentown, a tough, hard-working city in the Lehigh Valley. Here, everyone knows everyone else's business before the Sunday paper even hits the porch, and reputation? That's everything. When I was 25, I met Marcus Vance. He was incredibly bright, dangerously ambitious, and determined to build his own personal injury law firm from the ground up. And he did. He started with nothing but a $200,000 loan from his mother and countless hours of blood, sweat, and sleepless nights. His first office was a cramped, overheated, rented space above a noisy hardware store on Hamilton Street. Every time a potential client sat across from him, the paint-mixing machinery below would rumble and thud through the floor, making the whole place feel gloomy and unprofessional. But Marcus? He just persevered. In 6 years, he transformed that small, noisy office into a luxury suite in a commercial park. His staff adored him, and his firm was bringing in nearly $750,000 a year. The frosted glass door proudly read Vance and Associates. But even though his name was on that gorgeous door, his mother, Beatrice, never, ever forgot whose money bought the hinges. Not for a second. Marcus died on a typical late April Tuesday night. Heart failure. It was fast, brutal. They found him slumped over his massive mahogany office desk, his beloved ceramic coffee mug still clutched loosely in his hand. He was only 38. We got the call while I was giving our 5-year-old daughter, Lily, a bubble bath. It was all a blur after that. I don't remember hanging up. I just remember pulling Lily out of the tub, wrapping her in a towel, and rushing her next door to my neighbor's house. Then I raced to his office suite. I arrived with my sleeves still rolled up, my blouse damp with bathwater, and the lingering scent of pink, strawberry-scented soap under my nails. Paramedics were already there, but they were shutting off their monitors as I entered. They had given up. He was gone. The funeral was the following Monday. It was a suffocating swirl of black fabric, hushed whispers, and the cloying smell of funeral flowers. Inside, my mother-in-law, Beatrice, wore enormous, expensive black sunglasses. These weren't just shades. They were huge, covering half her face, making it impossible to tell if she was genuinely sobbing for her dead son or just performing for Allentown's legal community. Julian, Marcus's younger brother, stood anxiously beside her. Julian was 31, lived rent-free in the finished basement of Beatrice's huge house, and had never held a job for more than 4 months. He spent his days napping until 1 p.m., playing first-person shooters and ordering useless gear online with his mother's platinum credit card. To understand what happened next, you need to understand Beatrice. Beatrice wasn't some heartbroken widow. She was a brutal, inflexible businesswoman. She owned 5 coin-operated car washes and 2 massive laundromats across the Lehigh Valley, businesses she built herself after a bitter divorce from Marcus's father decades ago. She was sharp, business-savvy, and obsessed with earnings, with numbers. Or so she thought. Coin-operated car washes and laundromats use incredibly simple math. Dirty cars and clothes come in, machines take quarters or credit cards, clean cars and clothes leave, and cash goes into lockboxes. To Beatrice, everything in the universe followed this same simplistic logic, including a complex, high-stakes personal injury litigation business she had absolutely no experience with. Marcus's law career, in her eyes, was just a fancy slot machine. Instead of soaping Honda Civics, you sued insurers. Instead of coins, ledgers tallied $750,000 a year. From the very first Thanksgiving I spent with their family, Beatrice treated me like a cheap, temporary inconvenience Marcus would eventually outgrow and abandon. Before Marcus, I was just a dental hygienist. To her, I was ugly, my prospects poor. She even introduced me to her wealthy country club friends as Marcus's first wife, while Marcus and I, happily married, stood less than 3 feet away. Then, 9 days after I buried my husband, Beatrice showed up at my kitchen unexpectedly, on a rainy Thursday morning. I shouldn't have been surprised, honestly. Grief does strange things to you. It damages your body and mind, slows you down, paralyzes you. You just stand there, enduring devastating punches you'd normally see coming from a mile away. Beatrice marched into my kitchen through the garage door, dressed in a navy blue blazer. She was dressed for this house invasion like it was a board meeting. Julian shuffled in behind her, clutching a yellow Stanley tape measure, a real tape measure. Beatrice stood stiffly at my granite kitchen island, loudly declaring that she was reclaiming what her financial investment had built, while Julian randomly measured wardrobes in my guest bedroom, along the corridor. From the kitchen, I could hear the metallic tape snapping, swirling, and cracking against the walls. I stood there, motionless, numb, just wondering why Julian needed a walk-in closet when his prized possession was a handmade ergonomic gaming chair. Beatrice's argument sounded to me like a hostile takeover proposal made to a board of directors. All that seed money she'd provided for the law firm, the down payment on this house, that $40,000 she'd gifted us 8 years ago, and reminded us about it every single family occasion since. In her twisted, egotistical mind, she believed she owned everything Marcus had touched, built, or bought. Now that Marcus was gone, she wanted her initial investment back, plus a decade of compound interest. She wanted his firm. She wanted his house. She wanted his bank accounts. The only thing she didn't want was Lily. She said it so calmly, so dismissively, like denying a cheap restaurant side salad. No, thank you. I don't want the child, just the physical assets, please. I said nothing in my kitchen, just sweating, clutching a 3-minute-old mug of ice-cold coffee. I kept silent. My exhausted brain couldn't handle losing the love of my life and being physically looted by his family in the same week. Not because I agreed with her. 3 days later, the postman delivered a hefty certified letter that required a signature. It was from Richard Sterling, lawyer. Beatrice had officially contested Marcus's will. She was suing his estate as a significant creditor for $200,000 plus interest. This wasn't just nasty family squabbling anymore. This was a full-scale legal assault. She launched it before the soil on Marcus's grave had even settled. A common question people ask is, why would Marcus's mother think she could fight the will when Marcus left everything to me? Well, in Pennsylvania, and most states, any interested party can challenge a will on grounds like improper influence, which she naively asserted. But her main weapon was that creditor's claim. She filed a massive business loan claim against the estate, hoping to lock up all the assets and starve me out until I gave her the house and the business. She hired an expensive, aggressive probate shark to do it. Things escalated faster than anyone expected. Beatrice moved from vague kitchen threats to aggressive courtroom documents in just 72 hours. I was struggling to explain permanent death to a 5-year-old who kept asking why Daddy was missing dinner, all while lying on the far left side of a king-sized bed that still smelled like my dead husband's cologne. Beatrice's lawyer, Richard Sterling, was a notorious local shark. In the will fight, he argued that Beatrice's initial $200,000 loan represented a basic equity investment in the firm, giving her a valid ownership claim to its valuation. Simultaneously, an aggressive creditor demand for the raw loan amount was lodged. So, 2 major lawsuits. Beatrice was happily paying $450 an hour for fast, painful results. But Beatrice was a control freak. She didn't want to wait for the slow court system. Without hesitation, she started running her new empire physically. The week after the court filings, Beatrice drove her Lexus SUV to Marcus's office. She swept into Vance and Associates, a second-floor space with beautiful hardwood floors and expensive art, like the queen of the castle. She aggressively introduced herself to Marcus's morning staff, Brenda, the senior bookkeeper, 2 junior paralegals, a legal secretary, and a receptionist. Brenda, a dedicated woman in her late 50s, had meticulously managed Marcus's unpredictable finances for 7 years. Beatrice immediately called an all-hands meeting in the conference room. She stood at the head of the table and forcefully informed the terrified workers that she was now in control of all daily operations and that sweeping changes were coming to boost efficiency. Then, she coldly ordered Brenda to print the firm's 4-year gross revenue. Brenda, bewildered but determined to avoid conflict, printed the paperwork. Beatrice got the numbers, focused solely on the top line, $750,000 in annual gross billings. Grinning, she nodded smugly, as if to prove her own genius, and then promptly left the building. She never asked for expenditure reports, never requested accounts payable, never inquired about debts, overhead, or obligations. She always opened manila folders and computer files only to see the income. It was like ignoring the withdrawals column in your checking account and declaring yourself a millionaire. Then she started calling Marcus's clients. She sought out vulnerable people in ongoing personal injury lawsuits, getting their phone numbers. She called them from her own phone, introducing herself as the senior family representative managing their case transfers. There was no law allowing her to do this. She had no law degree, no state bar license, no civil litigation experience, and absolutely no idea what half of Marcus's complex medical malpractice cases even involved. But Beatrice was confident because she believed loud, aggressive confidence equaled legal knowledge. Most of Marcus's clients, after receiving a strange, rambling call from their recently deceased lawyer's mother, panicked. Over a dozen sought their case files and transferred to city rivals within a week. Beatrice spent thousands on legal fees to steal from me while simultaneously and purposefully weakening the business's main revenue stream. It was like watching a mad and burn down a mansion while arguing with the insurance adjuster over its valuation. Then Julian happened. A week after Beatrice's hostile office takeover, Julian's beat-up Honda Civic pulled into my driveway. He came to my front door, used Marcus's spare key from under the flower pot, and walked right in, boldly announcing that he was moving into my guest bedroom permanently. He was carrying 2 full duffel bags, a PlayStation 5, and a family-sized bag of Cool Ranch Doritos. His exact words? "Mom said the house is basically ours now, so I'm taking the big room overlooking the backyard." I just watched him. He had no bedding, nothing soft. He wore the kind of unprofessional clothes you'd wear to a job interview you didn't care about. Just a game console, tangled HDMI cables, and junk food. In that moment, a chilling rage, a blinding, protective rage, replaced my grief. "Tell him to leave my house," I said. Smiling, he crossed his arms and declined, stating that I was technically a guest at his mother's house. I didn't argue. No yelling, no shouting. I simply picked up my phone and called Allentown police. "Active hostile intruder refusing to leave my property," I told them. Within 9 minutes, 2 uniformed officers arrived. They checked my ID, calmly verified through public records that Marcus Vance owned the house, confirmed I was the legally surviving spouse, and then, without a word, dragged an angry, whining Julian back to his car. He left the enormous Doritos bag on my doorstep to avoid handcuffs, then kicked it into the bushes as he drove away. That night, my phone rang. It was Beatrice. She spoke frantically, in a way I didn't think humans could speak. It sounded like a dying smoke detector and a banshee had a baby. She screamed that I was a depraved, gold-digging monster and that Marcus would be appalled by my bloodshed on the cold streets. I gently reminded her that Julian lived rent-free in her heated, finished basement, complete with his own bathroom. She cursed, then slammed the phone down. My supporters started to rally around me. My mother drove from Scranton that weekend, taking my hands across the very kitchen island where Beatrice had declared war. My best friend, Sarah, called me every night on her way home from work. "Clara, honey, you have to fight this monster. You cannot let her roll over you. Get a lawyer, Clara. Get a shark. Bleed her dry. Don't let that witch take Lily's future." I listened. I hired Evelyn Thorne. Evelyn was recommended by a kind judge who adored Marcus. She was a terrifyingly intelligent woman in her late 50s, with perfectly arranged silver hair, piercing blue eyes, and a serene, lethal, exact aura that made you feel like you were behind a blast barrier. Evelyn had spent 25 years litigating bitter Pennsylvania estate disputes. She reviewed Beatrice's aggressive legal files in just 45 minutes, all while pouring me sparkling water in her luxurious office. Finally, she removed her reading glasses, tapped them on the desk, and smiled. A predatory grin. "Clara," Evelyn said, her voice watery, "this is entirely beatable. The $200,000 loan has no signed partnership agreement attached to it. There are no formal equity terms. There is absolutely nothing in writing that grants Beatrice Vance a single percentage of ownership in that law firm. Marcus's will? Spotless, ironclad, perfectly executed. We fight this. We win this. And your mother-in-law goes back to her laundromats with nothing but a massive legal bill and a humiliating lesson in basic contract law." A heavy weight lifted from my chest. We may win. We can crush her. I told Evelyn I needed a few days to review everything before filing our countersuit. That night, I couldn't sleep. After 3 readings of Lily's favorite, The Very Hungry Caterpillar book, the house was just too quiet, too empty. I felt this strange compulsion to go to Marcus's dark, empty office building across town. It was about 11 p.m. The commercial park was deserted. Only the eerie green emergency exit signs lit the pitch-black building stairway. I entered Vance and Associates through the heavy glass doors, walked down the silent hallway, and unlocked Marcus's corner office with the spare brass key on my keychain. I sat in his heavy leather chair. His scent still lingered throughout the room, dark roast espresso, old paper, and the expensive sandalwood aftershave he wore on our first date. I sobbed into my hands for hours in the dark. After washing my face, I unlocked the bottom drawer of his enormous desk, the deep, heavy drawer. It held his confidential files, the ones even the paralegals couldn't touch. My fingers brushed against thick paper as I passed archival case folders. Then I pulled it out, a huge, sealed manila envelope. Marcus had written my name on the front in his messy left hand. Not Clara Vance, just Clara, with a messy star, just like the notes he used to pass me across the table when we first started dating. The seal shattered, and my hands shook violently as I removed the contents. For over 2 hours, I sat immobile in that pitch-black office. I didn't cry. I didn't hyperventilate. For the first time since Marcus's death, I thought clearly. As the morning veil dissipated, I saw my spouse in spectacular clarity. I called Evelyn Thorne at 8 a.m. the next day. I spoke differently. I heard my own throat change. It stayed quiet, cold. She spoke after realizing she had a royal flush. I said, "Evelyn, cancel the countersuit. I've completely changed my mind. I do not want to fight Beatrice." Evelyn remained silent for a beat. I continued, "I want to surrender. I want to give Beatrice exactly what she's asking for. I want to give her the law firm. I want to give her the house. I want to give her every single asset in the entire estate." Evelyn Thorne spoke after what felt like 15 seconds. For a $600 an hour top estate attorney, 15 seconds of calm is practically a medical emergency. "Clara," she said, genuinely worried, "are you having a psychological break? Because I have a duty of care too." "I'm not crazy, Evelyn," I muttered. "I'm coming to your office right now, and I'm bringing something you need to see. Let me clarify what was in that sealed manila envelope." Without understanding Marcus's final, tortured months, the glorious destruction that followed simply makes no sense. 10 months before his terrible demise, Marcus was privately diagnosed with a major cardiac condition. He was having dreadful episodes at work, extreme shortness of breath just walking up the courthouse stairs, severe, crushing chest pains that came and went, and a peculiar, heavy lethargy that even 10 hours of sleep couldn't fix. To keep Allentown from knowing, he swallowed his pride and consulted a top-tier cardiologist at a large research hospital in Philadelphia, 2 hours away. The diagnosis was dire. It wouldn't kill him tomorrow, but the specialist used terrible terms like long-term palliative management and inevitable decline, staring at the floor in pity. Marcus considered his options. He never told anyone. He told his domineering mother nothing. His useless brother was kept completely in the dark. And not telling me? That still hurts. But you have to understand Marcus's character. He tried high-stakes personal injury cases. He spent his adult life sitting across from weeping, broken families, seeing lives destroyed because someone didn't prepare, cut legal corners, or arrogantly thought everything would just work out fine. Marcus never, ever wanted his wife and child to become another unhappy, impoverished lawyer's file. In those dreadful last 10 months, he still rose at 6 a.m., put on his expensive, perfectly fitting clothing, kissed me goodbye, and smiled through Beatrice's humiliations at Sunday dinners. He organized his finances discreetly and cleverly. The packet I found had 3 items. First, an initial handwritten letter, dated 6 weeks before his death. This wasn't chilly legal paperwork. My husband wrote a touching love letter. He wrote about our daughter, Lily, who had just started pronouncing helicopters as hellhoppers, and how he never wanted me to correct her because it made him so happy. He mentioned our first dentist appointment, which was actually 3 unnecessary tooth cleanings he booked just to talk to me again. The last line of that letter was crucial. It said, "Then, my beautiful Clara, do not let my mother take what actually matters. Let her have the rest. The math will protect you. I promise. Just trust me." It wasn't difficult legal advice, it was asking for faith. The second and third elements in the envelope showed Marcus knew I was educated enough to understand such sentences. 2. Beneficiary lists. Marcus had a lot of life insurance, $950,000. He'd taken it out 7 years ago when he started his firm because the commercial bank required collateral insurance to authorize his credit line. He was a healthy 31-year-old running marathons, so the thorough medical underwriting was easy. The policy had lasted 7 years. In his final months, Marcus quietly updated the beneficiary selection form on the insurance portal. I received it from the estate. Clara Vance was the sole beneficiary. Most importantly, updating a beneficiary on an active life insurance policy does not require a new medical exam. No underwriter review occurs. It's a basic administrative form, 1 digital signature, done. I would receive $950,000 immediately and neatly after his death. There would be no probate. His estate couldn't legally contain it. Beatrice could not spend it. She had no legal claim. Even if she bribed the Supreme Court to sue me, it wouldn't matter. The same covert trick was used with his retirement savings. I was the sole beneficiary of his $175,000 401k and his $65,000 Roth IRA. Legally identical. The beneficiary receives these payments directly, outside of probate and the estate, and creditors cannot touch them. Another $240,000 escaped Beatrice's greed. Remember, this isn't some secret legal loophole. Every state in America administers life insurance and retirement funds this way. That's why financial advisors recommend annual beneficiary designation reviews. Mundane Tuesday afternoon paperwork. Marcus had made his papers a loaded gun, pointed away from his family. Third, the true ledger of Vance and Associates. To close the envelope, Marcus had drafted a lengthy, brutally honest financial report. Every hidden debt, poisonous liability, and financial time bomb in his exquisite law practice was uncovered. And this is what turned me from a grieving widow into a steely, calculating, indomitable lady. The firm did earn $750,000 annually. 100% correct. Marcus had always raved about that outstanding statistic at family dinners. Beatrice learned that golden number like a Bible verse. But remove the pricey suits to get that $750,000 gross revenue, and here's what you get. $130,000 in highly delinquent vendor and overhead obligations, software licenses, court reporters, private investigators, expert witnesses. A $210,000 legal malpractice settlement. Marcus had misapplied a statute of limitations for a significant lawsuit 3 years prior. A legally binding settlement had been reached just weeks before his death, sitting there, awaiting a huge lump sum cash payment. $55,000 in payroll tax arrears. The IRS takes payroll taxes very seriously. As trust fund taxes, the firm owner is individually accountable. Bankruptcy cannot solve it. The office lease. The luxurious office suite had a 36-month, $4,500 business lease, a $162,000 future rent obligation for a space you cannot break without significant consequences. Finally, our gorgeous house. About $420,000 in market value. Marcus had secretly taken out a $250,000 home equity line of credit, Helic, 2 years ago to keep his failing company afloat while paying off those hefty debts. The house now had $430,000 in debt, including the catastrophic Helic and an $180,000 mortgage. The house was $10,000 underwater. Before adding 8% realtor fees, closing costs, and transfer taxes to sell, that magnificent home would fetch nothing. Even at closure, they would need $40,000 just to get rid of it. And finally, Beatrice's crucial $200,000 seed loan. Unsecured creditors, like Beatrice, are last in line in probate court. She lawfully trailed the IRS, the malpractice plaintiff, the business landlord, and every contract vendor. Beatrice would be broke once priority creditors lawfully plundered the inheritance. When Marcus's heart stopped, her $200,000 loan had, unknowingly to her, simply disappeared. I placed these documents on Evelyn Thorne's mahogany desk the next morning in her tidy office. Evelyn wore her spectacles. She checked the beneficiary forms. The taxes were checked. The house's terrible negative equity was estimated. She investigated the $210,000 malpractice scandal. She double-checked the math. A third time, she checked. Then, Evelyn Thorne, this terrifying, austere woman who had spent 25 years watching families fight over silver spoons, leaned back in her expensive leather chair, removed her glasses, and chuckled. It wasn't an unprofessional giggle. It was a hearty, roaring laugh, a moist, stomach-grabbing laugh. She looked at me, wiped a tear from her eye, and said, "Marcus was magnificent." She then wrote up the lifetime legal settlement offer using her favorite fountain pen. The following Tuesday, Evelyn formally contacted Richard Sterling, Beatrice's aggressive lawyer. Her settlement offer was, quite frankly, the most cowardly, absolute submission in Pennsylvania probate law history. The terms were startlingly simple. Clara Vance releases Marcus Vance's inheritance from lawsuits. This includes Vance and Associates law practice, the residential property, and all estate-related business and personal bank accounts. Beatrice Vance will legally accept all estate duties and assets. Beatrice Vance relinquishes the will contest, the creditor claim, and Lily Vance's custody rights. No visitation for Beatrice or Julian. Clara has exclusive physical and legal custody. The end. Take the empire. Leave me my daughter. Fortunately for me, Richard Sterling was suspicious. An experienced attorney looks for the loophole when an opponent gives you what you wanted without a battle. Sterling rang Evelyn immediately. He sought more time. He required a third-party forensic review of the law firm's books before his client signed. "Give me 3 weeks," he pleaded. 3 weeks to tear this firm's finances apart. Something is wrong here. That was his sole request. Beatrice glared him down and said no. Here's an intriguing psychological fact. Beatrice thought she was being wise. It made perfect sense, given her ego and her misperception of me. Beatrice had observed me for 8 years. No matter how much she attacked my work or my upbringing, the quiet, pleasant, deeply non-confrontational woman she saw never yelled, raised her voice, or pushed back during a toxic Thanksgiving lunch. Beatrice grew arrogant. She felt I was folding under pressure again. She believed I was weak and terrified, avoiding a battle with a stronger woman. In poker, you don't say, "Wait, let me double-check my cards," if you have a royal flush and your terrified opponent is trying to escape. You take the money. I've seen the revenue reports with my own eyes. Beatrice told Sterling. $750,000 a year. My son built that empire with my money. That little gold digger is finally scared of me. Get me those transfer papers to sign before she finds her spine and changes her mind. Sterling resisted. His malpractice insurance required professionalism. He wrote his client an angry letter. It was 3 single-spaced pages long. He advised Beatrice to wait for a forensic examination before lawfully accepting any asset or liability transfers because legal due diligence on the firm's genuine financial state was unproven. Normal legal procedure. This is how attorneys cover their backs. And Sterling, being stylish, covered his. Beatrice barely read the letter. aggressively signed the responsibility waiver at the bottom despite her legal counsel's advice, and urged Sterling to schedule the final signing ASAP. One loose end. Sterling asked Evelyn Thorne one last time, "Are there any non-probate, non-estate assets we should be aware of? Specifically, life insurance policies or retirement accounts with named beneficiaries?" Evelyn, ever the professional, followed the laws. She said, "Non-estate assets with named beneficiaries are, by legal definition, completely outside the scope and jurisdiction of this estate settlement. My client is under absolutely no legal obligation to disclose them to your client." Sterling sent that email to Beatrice. She waved her hand and ignored it. Marcus had never told her about life insurance. She arrogantly assumed he had none. Why would he? Being 38 and young, he seemed indestructible. Death doesn't bother young men. But Marcus did have it. He'd paid his premiums on time every month, even while his firm was silently dying, because a bank had forced him to 7 years ago. And because he loved me. I constructed my new life in secret as Beatrice frantically signed legal disclaimers and ignored her expensive attorney's urgent advice. The life insurance company handled my death benefit claim in 18 days. I secretly opened a high-yield personal checking account with $950,000 at a credit union in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. I chose a credit union Marcus had never used. It had no connection to his name, estate, or firm. 2 weeks later, I legally turned over his retirement accounts, $175,000 from his 401k and $65,000 from his Roth IRA simply entered my private investment accounts. My $1,190,000 was clean, undetected, and untouchable. My things departed the large mansion quietly. I didn't bother with much. While Lily was at childcare, I packed several containers. Her favorite toys, clothes, important documents, and photo albums were packed. Beatrice's dream furniture, huge TVs, and fine dining set were left alone. I found a sunny, 2-bedroom apartment in a quiet, safe neighborhood near Lily's top primary school in Bethlehem. Monthly rent was $2,200. I paid the initial, final, and security deposits with a cashier's check from my new account, without hesitation. Julian, meanwhile, was living his dream. While the legal documentation was finalized, Beatrice instructed him to manage daily operations at the law office. There he was, a 31-year-old community college dropout, spinning in circles in Marcus's nice leather recliner, playing phone games, and struggling to transfer calls on the multi-line phone system. He bought expensive catered dinners for himself every single day with business money. He even asked a scared paralegal what a retainer meant. On her 4th day as CEO, Beatrice made her worst mistake. She instructed Julian to drive to the commercial bank and become an authorized cosigner on the firm's operational accounts so he could sign operating checks and paychecks without bothering her. Julian entered the bank, sat with the manager, and happily signed every difficult, multi-page financial form. Unread. No questions asked. He was unaware that signing those commercial banking documents made him jointly and severally liable for any major overdrafts, vendor payment plans, or tax obligations associated with that operating account. Julian always read with a joystick and a bright screen in his hand, not a pen. My mom from Scranton visited again before the signing. She entered my modest new flat, saw the cheap IKEA dining table I'd spent 3 hours building, with a butter knife, because I couldn't find the Allen wrench, and looked at me in horror, crying. "Clara, honey, please," she begged. "You're giving up Marcus's entire life's work. You're giving up a $500,000 house. Are you having a nervous breakdown? We can fight her. I'll remortgage my own house to help you pay Evelyn." I urgently wanted to tell her. I wanted to show her my laptop screen, display the credit union account, and have her gasp at the $1.19 million sum. But I couldn't. Not yet. Not until the settlement ink was dry. The Lehigh Valley is both big and small. My mother might accidentally tell her sister, who might tell her hairdresser, who might clip the hair of Beatrice's laundry manager. One leak was unacceptable. I hugged her and whispered, "Mom, I promise you, on Lily's life, I know exactly what I am doing." It will be spectacularly okay. Despite doubting me, she stopped asking. The final legal signing was scheduled for a rainy early July Tuesday morning. The night before, I put Lily's favorite dinosaur t-shirt in her daycare bag and my leather tote bag with my just-signed apartment lease and my multi-million-dollar bank statements at the bottom. I set my alarm for 6:30 a.m. I fell asleep in my new apartment bed after 5 minutes of pulling the covers up. It was my best sleep in months. Richard Sterling's law office was on the 4th floor of a beautiful brick building in downtown Allentown. His enormous glass conference room had thick oak tables, comfy chairs, and a corner espresso machine. Evelyn Thorne and I arrived accurately at 9:45 a.m., waiting silently on the other side of the huge table. At precisely 10 a.m., Beatrice opened the glass doors. With her were Julian and Sterling. She looked like she was attending the Met Gala of spiteful mothers-in-law, in a white silk outfit that cost more than my first car, flawless makeup, and heavy gold jewelry. Julian wore a new gray suit that fit poorly. The white cardboard price tag was clearly hanging from his left armpit. No one told him. I wasn't about to ruin his big moment. The legal documents were complex and brutal. Clara Vance transfers all claims to Marcus Vance's estate assets, including Vance and Associates, the home property at address, and all business and personal financial accounts to Beatrice Vance permanently and irrevocably. Beatrice Vance lawfully assumes all known and unknown financial liabilities for declared assets. Beatrice Vance gives up custody of Lily. Evelyn Thorne made one last quiet, devastatingly good legal statement before I signed. She said, "For the official record in the quiet chamber, my client is signing this settlement entirely voluntarily. Furthermore, my client wishes to explicitly confirm on the record that the opposing party has fully reviewed and legally accepted the estate, inclusive of all disclosed liabilities." Sterling nodded grimly, his eyes imploring as he looked at Beatrice again. Miss Beatrice ignored him. She disregarded Evelyn. When she looked at me, her eyes burned with arrogance. She grabbed her expensive gold pen hard. Paper signing. Moved it across the table. Beatrice signed. Julian smiled like a Fortune 500 CEO. All legal proceedings took 12 minutes. Life's fastest, most profitable 12 minutes. Beatrice twisted the knife one last time as I stood up to retrieve my coat. She needed the final word. She stood, fixed her expensive silk blouse, looked me in the eye with contempt, and said, "I sincerely hope, Clara, that you finally learn how to stand on your own 2 feet and get a real job without a Vance man around to subsidize your mediocre life." Julian laughed, nodding, possibly not comprehending what she said, but agreeing on principle, because that's Julian. I didn't blink. No frowning. I simply smiled at her, looked her directly in the eyes, and said, "Good luck with the business, Beatrice." I took my bag, exited the glass doors, climbed the elevator to the foyer, drove to daycare, picked up Lily, and we celebrated with enormous chocolate milkshakes. We returned to our safe new flat. We watched Moana twice. Takeout pizza was greasy and bad. After putting her to bed, I sat on my new living room floor, leaned against the wall, and breathed deeply. The war was over. And I had won. Beatrice Vance took over Vance and Associates 2 weeks later as its sole legal, uncontested owner, ready to rule her new kingdom. I wasn't there to witness the tragedy, but the Allentown legal community could hear the bomb go off. People talk, paralegals talk, court clerks whisper. Beatrice shared some of her favorite details in her final, emotional call. The empire perished painfully day by day. Day 1, Marcus had placed Beatrice at his enormous wooden desk. After weeks, she opened the tall stack of boring mail in the corner. Since the envelopes didn't look like checks, she'd passed them a dozen times without opening them. The third envelope included an IRS-certified letter, which she finally opened. A formal notice of intent to levy $55,000 in unpaid business payroll taxes. The letter stated heavy financial penalties and daily interest were collecting. In her capacity as sole legal proprietor, Beatrice was now under federal scrutiny. Day 3. Philadelphia's terrifyingly aggressive litigation attorney contacted Beatrice. sweetly but firmly. He represented Marcus's massive legal malpractice plaintiff. The attorney calmly informed Beatrice that the $210,000 settlement agreement had been legally finalized before Marcus's death, that the payment was 30 days overdue, and that if a wire transfer wasn't initiated within 48 hours, he would immediately file a motion to freeze the firm's operating accounts and seize its physical assets. Day 5. The office building's commercial property management called. They had noticed the legal business ownership change. Beatrice had to swiftly sign a strict personal guarantee to take over the commercial lease and keep the office space. If she refused, she had 14 days to depart the spacious apartment, effectively dismantling any notion that the firm was still working. Beatrice foolishly signed the personal guarantee, assuming the firm made $750,000 a year. She considered $4,500 a month rent pocket change for a company that made that much. She signed, pledging her own assets to $162,000 in inescapable rent for a deceased corporation. Day 8. Beatrice had no idea how to bill clients, log hours, or settle settlements. She tried opening Marcus's difficult QuickBooks file. His software was a disaster without Brenda, the senior bookkeeper she had arrogantly fired. Brenda was the only one who understood 7 years of meticulously categorized legal trust accounts, retainer deposits, and vendor codes. In fear, Beatrice engaged a $150 an hour freelance forensic accountant to figure things out. The accountant checked digital ledgers, cross-referenced letters, and reconciled bank accounts for 5 hours at a computer. Slowly, she turned her chair to face Beatrice. The accountant looked like someone who opened a closet door expecting winter clothes, but found a live hand grenade with the pin pulled off. The accountant said, "Ma'am," politely, "are you fully aware that there is currently over $130,000 in strictly outstanding, past due vendor invoices logged in this system? Some of these private investigator bills and expert witness fees are over 10 months delinquent. They are preparing to sue the firm." Day 10. Brenda, Beatrice's loyal bookkeeper, who had been fired without cause, filed a wrongful termination lawsuit for unpaid severance, PTO, and damages. Estimated legal liability? $25,000. Drowning. Beatrice was drowning. The walls were closing in quickly. She obsessively examined the deposits column, but all the clients had left, and the withdrawals column was a screaming pit. She hysterically called her lawyer, Richard Sterling, that night. Her teakettle voice, which I despised, is what I imagine her yelling at him. She ordered him to fix it and charge me with fraud. She wanted the settlement overturned. Sterling didn't reply. He calmly opened his client file. She overheard his 3-page advisory letter on the phone. He reiterated the haughty legal liability disclaimer she signed against his advice. He reminded her to wait for a forensic audit. "I strongly recommended due diligence," Sterling stated coldly. "You explicitly declined in writing. I have the signed documentation in my hand. There is absolutely nothing I can do for you. I am officially withdrawing as your legal counsel. My final invoice will be mailed tomorrow." Beatrice called me. I was watching Lily build a huge magnetile structure on the rug, drinking cheap red wine on my new couch. My mobile phone glowed. Beatrice Vance called. I watched it ring once, twice, 3 times, 4 times. After taking a slow sip of wine, smiling, and laying the phone face down on the coffee table, I went to help Lily find the blue square tiles. Beatrice fought on. She was a cornered animal. She desperately sought out Philadelphia's aggressive, expensive lawyer, Margaret Vance. Margaret had fresh eyes and a deadly reputation. A sad Beatrice lied in Margaret's lovely office. Her malicious, deceitful, intelligent daughter-in-law had allegedly deceived, legally manipulated, and ruthlessly fooled her into accepting a worthless, debt-ridden estate. She demanded Margaret sue me beyond recognition for misrepresentation. Margaret meticulously reviewed every document for a substantial retainer. The final settlement review, she read the liability waiver, the assessment of Sterling's recommended letter. Weeks before signing, she reviewed Evelyn Thorne's meticulous estate probate documents, which had officially specified all liabilities. The voluminous probate appendices listed every vendor, debt, tax lien, and malpractice action. Nothing hidden. Nothing fabricated. Nothing I lied about. I hadn't offered to read her the paperwork like a child. I simply hadn't included my legal $1.19 million in non-probate life insurance and retirement assets. Margaret read the entire file, closed it, and told Beatrice the terrible truth. "You are represented by highly competent legal counsel," Margaret allegedly said. "Your counsel explicitly advised you to wait for a full audit. You aggressively refused. You signed a binding liability waiver. The settlement you signed was entirely voluntary, mutual, and perfectly documented. There is absolutely zero evidence of legal fraud here. She didn't trick you. You blinded yourself." Margaret waited, then struck last. "What you have here, Beatrice, is not a viable legal claim. What you have is an incredibly expensive life lesson." Beatrice fought to sell the massive mansion to feed her beast. She had wanted this mansion for years. She hired an expensive realtor. The agent ran comps, pulled the title, and delivered terrible math at Beatrice's kitchen table. The remaining $180,000 mortgage, Marcus's concealed $250,000 HELOC, closing costs, transfer taxes, and 6% agent compensation were all paid off. The sale of the gorgeous mansion would net Beatrice nothing. In fact, removing the submerged property from her name would cost her $43,000 at closing. Houses aren't assets when the exit fees are that high. The IRS ignored Beatrice's mental anguish. The daily payroll tax penalty rose considerably. The business office landlord threatened personal litigation for breach of the lease guarantee. Vendors aggressively filed petty claims. Beatrice had no choice. She hurriedly sold her valuables to pay Marcus's debts. She had aggressively accumulated laundromat money for 30 years. She panic-sold her most profitable Bethlehem coin-op car wash. She sold the huge Easton laundromat at a loss to get cash fast enough to avoid IRS bank account seizure. 2 of her treasured businesses vanished in 3 months. She barely covered the large malpractice settlement or the business lease guarantee. Finally, Julian. Sweet, lazy, arrogant Julian. Julian, who had enjoyed playing managing partner for 3 weeks before the financial crash, finally realized he was on the Titanic. He left ship. He drove to the commercial bank and casually requested to remove his co-signer status on the firm's operational accounts. The bank manager politely requested seating. Management had torn up Julian's excitedly signed contracts without him reading them. A calm manager told Julian that signing such documents meant joint and multiple liability for all account obligations. After the legal transfer of ownership, Beatrice had set up a hurried $40,000 vendor payment schedule utilizing that account. Julian legally owed that loan. Julian panicked. In trouble, he did what he knew. He hired a lawyer. The 31-year-old hired an aggressive local attorney to sue his mother for paying his cell phone bill and buying Doritos for his whole adult life. Beatrice, he claimed in his lawsuit, had coerced and manipulated him into signing complicated financial bank documents. His sad case failed. As a legal adult, he had signed the documents in a bank lobby without coercion. The judge chuckled at the courtroom drama. However, the complaint, Julian Vance versus Beatrice Vance, existed. It was filed in Lehigh County Common Pleas with docket entries and a public case number. Mom and son, that inseparable, toxic, arrogant duo who had confidently stood in my kitchen with a Stanley tape measure, merrily scheming to divide my life and leave me homeless, were now paying thousands of dollars to viciously sue each other into bankruptcy. If Hollywood had hired me to create a movie script, I could not have written a more magnificent, karmically flawless climax. In the dreadful weeks after Marcus died, I had dreamed of numerous vengeance options. Marcus's world was prettier than theirs. I answered Beatrice's final call. It was late October, and the Pennsylvania foliage was a brilliant orange and red. I said, "Hi," and she sobbed. Not her staged sniffling behind Chanel sunglasses at Marcus's burial. True. Painful, hyperventilating tears. Broken crying that shook the phone speaker. She said she lost everything. 3 of her businesses sold. Her savings vanished. Julian ignored her. The Internal Revenue Service audited her returns. This happened without her knowledge. She reported drowning. She begged for help. Her question was whether Marcus had left anything. She asked for a loan to save her last laundromat. I sat on my couch. Her cry lasted 3 minutes. I never interrupted her. As she panted, I spoke. My voice was stable and cold. "Beatrice," I muttered. "Do you remember when you stood in my kitchen 9 days after my husband died? You looked me in the eye and you told me that you wanted absolutely everything. You wanted the firm. You wanted the house. You wanted every single dollar." She cried louder on the phone. "You also explicitly told me," I continued, "that you did not want my daughter. You said you didn't sign up to raise someone else's child. You just wanted the assets." I paused, letting a sword-like silence hang in the air. "I gave you exactly what you aggressively demanded, Beatrice. I gave you every single piece of it. Enjoy your empire." I hung up. I blocked her number. I blocked Julian's number. I got up, went to the kitchen, and helped Lily glue dry macaroni to bright yellow construction paper. She demanded extra noodles for the ears of her beautiful golden retriever painting. Perhaps she was right. After Lily fell asleep in her cozy bed, I sat at my IKEA table alone, the same table I proudly built using YouTube instructions and a butter knife because I couldn't find the Allen wrench. I opened my laptop. The screen illuminated the dark flat. I checked the community college's paralegal certification admissions page. I'd thought about it for months. The accelerated program semester tuition was $5,500. I opened a new tab and checked my credit union account. The proud balance was $1,182,400. I grinned. I had no trouble paying tuition. A $6 black wooden frame I bought at a craft store held Marcus's final handwritten message next to my laptop. Reading wasn't required. All the words were recalled. The small, sloppy star he drew next to my name caught my attention before I shut off the light. What would you have done in my place? Had you ever faced such blatant greed from family after a loss? Tell me what you think in the comments below. I really want to know.